10-minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 285. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 285 of the 10-minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. So happy to have you back in. This is our bonus episode for the month. We've already done our 4 episodes that contain a lot of specific things to work on. And since there are 5 Fridays in the month of October, I figured I'd give you a little Q&A episode that's going to feature a question from one of our longest time supporters, David, and we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between approaching traditional jazz from the 20s and 30s era and how that differs from approaching stuff from the bebop era and after. And I think this is a question that I've heard a lot and a question that I address a lot in my lessons. So I think this should be valuable for a lot of you out there. So before we jump into the show, as always, just wanted to let you know that we do not have advertisements on this show. That is not how we support this production. Instead, we rely on you, the listener, to donate a small amount of money each month to keep the podcast going, keep the episodes coming out in high quality week after week, and you can do that by supporting us on Patreon. For that small monthly donation every month, you do get some fantastic rewards, including a PDF of every week's materials, and the second tier also includes audio examples of every single episode. So wanted to give a quick shout out. We have a bunch of new members this week, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining the 10-minute Jazz Lesson family. Thank you to our new $5 patrons. Thank you to Gordon, James, and Ollie. And thank you to our new $3 patrons, Edu, Thomas, John, Robert, and Jared. Thank you guys so much for joining up. You will get those fantastic rewards every single week from here on out. And of course, to the other people over there that have been supporting us, some of them for years at this point, thank you, thank you, thank you. You really make this show possible. So go to 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, and sign yourself up today for instant access to all 285 episodes. All right, so let's jump into today's episode. So this question comes from David, one of our longtime listeners and supporters, and he asked it in the 10-minute Jazz Lesson community Facebook group. And I thought it was a really interesting question and something that, again, I have heard from a lot of different people about the difference between playing an older style of jazz, so think like Louis Armstrong, Sidney Bechet, Bix Beiderbecke, names like that, and then the newer style of jazz, which we talk about a lot on this program, which think Charlie Parker and later. So David's question goes something like this. I've been listening to the Soggy Po Boys, which is a band that I play with that plays pretty much exclusively trad jazz and music of New Orleans on YouTube, and I think you guys sound fantastic. Thanks, David. Let's say I wanted to sit in with the band. I'm thinking I need to do 2 things: grow a beard. And David, that is true. You do need to have a pretty gnarly beard to be good at playing trad jazz. No, of course, I'm just kidding, but we do all have beards. It must be due to living in this cold climate up in New England that we all want some whiskers on our face to protect us from that freezing cold air. Number 2, learn more about how to play in that style. So my question is, how do you play in that swing style as opposed to playing bebop or more modern lines? And this question really gets to the heart of a lot of things. How has music changed over the years? Or more specifically, how did music change from before bebop to after bebop? And what we can do is we can narrow that down to a few simple concepts that will get us a lot of the way there toward like sort of understanding the difference between the sounds. And I will tell you that when I first started playing with the Soggy Po Boys, I had never really played that style. In music school, what is taught is basically bebop and forward for some reason. I wish it wasn't like that, but it kind of is. So for the first about year that I played with the Soggy Po Boys, I really didn't know what I was doing. And you could tell by the way that I was playing. I did not understand that style difference, and I was trying to stick a bunch of modern sounding stuff over these old chord progressions, and it really sounded bad. So I came to a few realizations about how to more appropriately fit into that style, and let's go over some of those right here. Okay, so let's start with the first concept. So bebop and more modern jazz is based almost entirely off of seventh chords. We don't see too many simple triads or sixth chords in bebop music. As jazz gets more modern, we are seeing more of that simple harmony without sevenths. That's kind of the direction that jazz is moving in. But if you look at the music of the 1950s through about the 1990s, it was really based on these complicated seventh chord structures. Trad jazz, however, places more of an emphasis on the sixths, particularly over a major chord. So I'm talking about a non-dominant chord, right? So whereas in bebop, we might hear this sound, that's a C major 7 chord, and that gives us a feeling of a little bit of tension, even over a 1 chord, where we have that. When we look back at the music of the 20s and 30s, what we see is more 6 chords, which still does have some tension, but it's not as much. It's a little bit more of a stable sound. So here's the 7th chord. Here's the 6th chord. So what I didn't realize when I started playing this music is I love the sound of the major 7, and it was so drilled into my ear that I kept on using major 7s, and it really didn't work over the top of a 6 chord. So I had to learn how to remove that 7th and start using the 6 a lot more, the 6 being a really, really characteristic sound of swing music. So over a bebop tune, I might play something like this. Over a major chord, and that would be totally appropriate because we're hearing the sound of that major 7 ringing in our ears. When I play over a more trad tune, I will sound a little bit more like this. And you can hear how different that sounds when we replace that major 7 with the 6. It gives it a completely different feeling over the top of that chord. So there's number 1. Over a major chord, over a 1 chord, avoid that major 7th and base your sound a little bit more off of the major pentatonic than you would over arpeggiating a major 7 chord. That will get you a long way towards sounding more appropriate when you're playing an older style of jazz. Okay, the second thing is a little bit more complicated, but I think most of you will understand what I'm talking about. So in bebop, we really outline all of the chords. So we play chord to chord a lot of the time in bebop. Not always, but it's really an accepted way to play in bebop. In a more traditional style of jazz, like when we see a turnaround at the end of a tune, like a 2-5-1 or a 5-5-5-1, one of the things that trad musicians will do that's a lot different is they'll be playing over the 1 chord over the entire turnaround. And it just gives it a little bit more gravity, and it provides for a more simple, easy to follow sound. And this was something that I was very unfamiliar with when I was younger because I was trying to follow every single chord with that bebop that I was studying. But that is another thing that I had to really learn. So let's say I have a 5-5 to 5-1 in the key of C. So D7 to G7 back to C6. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of use the major pentatonic with a minor third, and I'm really going to paint with a brush in the key of C over those other chords. Even though those other chords are the ones that are being sounded, I am connotating a sound of C over that. So here's a perfect example. 1, 2, 3, 4. So what I'm doing is I'm totally disregarding the D7 chord and the G7 chord, and I'm just playing in C, and I'm leading myself back to that one, the sound of the one. You don't hear Charlie Parker do this very often. Every now and again over a blues, you'll hear this kind of thing, but it doesn't happen all that often. So the third thing is I want to give you a scale that is really, really going to help you when it comes to understanding this music and understanding the kind of sounds that it connotates. So if you take that major pentatonic, which is 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and you add the minor third to it. So now we have 1, 2, flat 3, 3, 5, 6. That is the most characteristic sound I can think of when it comes to a more traditional jazz sound, a more swing jazz sound. Okay, so really, really learn that scale, get comfortable with it. And even if you're just messing around with that scale without, any kind of backing, whatever, not even over a tune, you can really hear the sound of that traditional music. You can really hear the sound of a Louis Armstrong. You really get the connotation of that older style of jazz when you hear that collection of tones. So really start to explore that, all right? So first of all, no sevenths on major chords. Second of all, learn how to, again, paint over a turnaround, a cadence, by using just the one chord, and then learn that modified major pentatonic. And of course, there are a million other things that you can do. There's a lifetime of study you can do with the more traditional jazz to get that sound into your playing. But I think that these three things will be a really good start. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions. David, I hope that addresses your question in a way that you can go forward with some knowledge. And I hope a lot of you out there find this useful. Let me know if you have any questions. You can always get in touch with me on the Facebook community group. And you can always get in touch with me by emailing me at 10minutejazzlesson@gmail.com. Again, go over to the Patreon site if you like this show, want to support it, want to see it keep happening week in and week out. 10minutejazzlesson.com. Click on one of the Patreon banners. You get all 285 episodes with PDFs for each of them. Hope you're all doing well out there. As always, staying safe and healthy. And we will see you next week with a brand new episode. Have a good one, everybody. Talk to you soon. Bye.